Cool. I wonder, Claire, do you think we're ready to get started?
Yep, you can do.
Nice. I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. And modelling your new haircuts very well, I'm sure. So just a recap over our project ambition. So the main aims of the project we're trying to meet residents' needs better, particularly our vulnerable residents. We're trying to provide better technology for staff and reduce duplication. And we're also trying to find ways to better manage the increased demand across the service. So this is the tube map of our service vision, which by now regulars to the show and share will be very familiar with. So we've got 3 lines going on. The orange line is geared to people who are able to help themselves and will involve lots of them self-serving tools. The middle line is for those that require a bit more help. So we would be working along the idea of creating a shared plan with them and then creating some check-ins and nudging them along that line. And then the bottom line is more around creating a full holistic support for people who need much greater support, who have multiple and complex needs, and that potentially could involve pulling in different parts of the service and third parties. A couple of other points on the map, just to highlight the crisis support point on the blue lines, because as we all realise, that's often what throws people into these situations. And then the little branch line at the top, that some people may just need to come to us for just a little bit of information and advice, and then they can resolve their problems themselves. So this slide is trying to get the impression across of how we identify the link between people's strengths and assets and their homelessness journey. So customers that I've talked about on their self-service journey on the orange line will have had higher strengths and assets identified, and are likely to be further away from homelessness than those are further down in the other sections of this graph. Particularly want to highlight the people in the corner that we'd be creating multidisciplinary teams around and providing holistic support, where we anticipate that they will be closer to homelessness and not have so many strengths and assets, so need greater degree of support. So this slide shows us the tools that we've been working on. The ones highlighted in green are the things that we're developing at the moment. The other ones that are just in the background there are ones that we've already been delivering but are still working on. So things like the waiting time tool, single view, SMS tool. So there's 2 aspects to this. One, that obviously we're trying to create tools that help customers and ourselves to deliver the service better in line with the service vision. But it's also, there's an underlying issue to this, that we're trying to move away from some of our legacy systems that on a day-to-day basis aren't necessarily fit for how we work now. So it's moving away from UHT and UHW. So we'd like to introduce now the TNT. So this will be a guide that we're looking to put together for every team. It's called TNT because of tools and team, and naturally it will be exploded onto a team near you soon. So this is going to give people an idea of, put everything in the journey into one place, so that staff that haven't necessarily been involved in testing or haven't used the tools so much so far can see where they would fit in your daily work and how you would use them on a daily basis and how you would get customers to use them on a daily basis. So watch out, this will be coming to you soon. So what we're going to show you today. So we have updates on evidence store, understanding vulnerability, shared plan, and our self-service tools for the orange line journey. I'll hand over to evidence store.
Good morning. Yeah, so Evidence Store is first up to date, and Evidence Store is one of the newer tools we've been working on, which we're designing to be a simple and fast way for staff and customers to upload and manage documents to improve efficiency and user experience. And if you're familiar with the doc upload tool, you can consider the Evidence Store kind of doc upload 2.0, which will eventually replace the doc upload. And so how is this going to work in practice? So staff and residents will be able to easily upload evidence documents. These documents will then all be stored and managed in one place. So there's no need to go in and out of separate systems. And the documents can all be viewed from within single view. And this is a tool that we envisage being eventually scaled outside the service to right across the council. And in the service vision, we anticipate that the evidence store will be most used at approach as we gather evidence about a resident status, but it could also be used as a person continues their journey as and when more documentation is required. And so what benchmarks can we set to measure success? So we want to measure the time it takes to achieve various tasks with the aim of reducing those timescales in the future. So from next sprint, we're going to start contacting people in the service to find out what data is currently available, so we can try and start measuring things like what's the average time from requesting a document to the submission of a document. So can we help residents provide more information more quickly? What's the average time from when a document is submitted to when that document is accepted? So can we speed up the process of getting documents checked and approved? What's the average time spent manually processing documents that are brought into the service centre? And we hope to be able to save a lot of staff time here. And then lastly, what's the average time spent collating documents required for a common application like a benefits application? So how much time can staff save by just checking one system rather than multiple systems?
Good morning. Just a quick tech update from me this morning. So we've been developing the Evidence Store API the last while to allow us to store and retrieve documents easily. The past couple of weeks we've been plugging this API into our existing tools so we can do some testing around some stuff. So is it going to save staff time? Is it going to reduce duplication? And is it going to be easier for staff and residents to get their documents in? So what we've been adding at the moment, the ability to request customer documents from the single view, so straight out of there, then uploading these documents from the customer side in the doc upload tool, and then back to the single view, so viewing the documents in the single view activity feed.
So I'm going to hand over to Chris now, who will give you a bit of a walkthrough of some future concepts of what this could look like, design in practice.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see a screen now. Yeah, so to give you an idea of what we're ultimately envisaging, I'll take you through this prototype journey, but I want to just be clear that this is definitely not a real product at the moment, but hopefully it does give you an idea of the future direction of travel. So if we start off this from within single view, I can see on this fictitious person's account that they've had some evidence requested, received for review and accepted recently. And then down here we've got a document section, and I can see that there's 3 documents for Belinda Smith in the evidence store. So if I go in to view those documents and jump over into the evidence store, I can see that there are 2 documents to review. There's one accepted document, and I can also request documents from the resident. So first off, if we want to go and review one of those documents, say there's proof of identity that's been provided, I can review this, and without having to download and then look at this piece of evidence in a separate window, I can just see it directly here. Apart from this clearly being a fake driving license, I can't see properly the signature or the address, so I'm going to need to reject it. So here I can choose whether I want to approve or reject the piece of evidence. So here, let's reject it with a reason, and I can provide a reason why I might want to reject that. So here, the required information is not shown. So down here, a message has been pre-populated for me that I can then forward on to the resident, giving them instructions on what they need to do next. And if I want to add a bit more information into this, I can. So let's pretend I've also added in some text saying, please resubmit evidence without reflection visible. I can do that. And then this also provides the link of where they need to resubmit that to. I can check the box of how I want to notify the resident and then send that rejection message. So here I've got a message to confirm that I've sent that message off to Belinda. And from here I can go back and view her other documents that are on file. So from here, I might realise that I need to request another document from her. So from here, I could choose from a pre-selected list of things. So for instance, if I wanted to provide a disability living allowance confirmation, I can check that box. And then I can select how I want to request that. So again, let's do that by SMS. And I can send a request directly to the resident here, and this confirms what's been requested from her. And then from the resident side of things, if we think about separate journey, if a resident was to receive a message from the council. This one saying that we need you to provide some evidence of personal documents. Here's a link to securely upload those documents. So let's click on that link. And here, this is a different example, but this is asking for a bank statement and a utility bill. So if I've got my utility bill to hand, let's upload this one from my phone. I can take a photo. This is my utility bill. Let's take that picture and then use that. And then I might want to go and say, okay, let's submit those documents, but I've actually forgotten this bank statement here, so I need to do that one too. So again, if I take a photo of my bank statements, let's see, here it's on my computer, let's try sending a screenshot. I'll take that one and see if I can use that one. So let's submit those documents, and then once I've submitted those, I get a message to say they've been submitted for review, and I'll get a text message to update me on the progress. So that hopefully gives you an idea where we're eventually hoping to take this, but this again it's not real yet. So just to wrap up this, so what's next? So as mentioned before, we want to start benchmarking how long things currently take. So in the next sprint, we'll start contacting various people in the service, and we're going to start testing the new process of uploading documents from doc upload into single view. And we're also going to be looking at the current usage of doc uploads to see if there are any insights that we can take to inform the next steps of the evidence store.
Nice one. Thanks, Chris. So I'll now give you a brief update on understanding vulnerability, which, as you will all know, is about how can we build a bigger picture of the resident when they contact any part of the service. So this is quite an important point on the tube map. This is understanding someone's vulnerability, but also the assets that they have. So we can see if the self-service journey is right for them, if they need a bit of coaching and support, or if they need the more intensive but holistic multidisciplinary team service. So since last time, you'll know that we have the vulnerability snapshot live on single view for a number of people. If you've been using it, you will have seen that we've updated the resources that pop up when you select a vulnerability. So now you only get 2 or 3 things per checkbox. So big thank you to Jennifer, to Arto and to Simon and others who've suggested those things that should be prioritized. We've also tidied up some of the user interface. So you can see from these 2 screenshots that we've moved the resources out to a different sidebar, so you don't get these big white gaps and the form is more condensed and easier to navigate for users. And we now have 12 officers who are actively using this from 10 different teams within benefits and housing needs, as well as customer services, which is brilliant. And so far, over the past week, we've had 23 snapshots which have been captured. So I'm now going to hand over to David, who's one of the people who has been trying this, just to tell us a little bit about how he found it and some ideas for improvements.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily. Hi, guys. My name's David. I'm part of the medical team. So I've been using the vulnerability snapshot. As part of the team, we carry out assessments for clients wishing to be placed on the housing register on medical grounds. We assess medical evidence to determine medical priority on the housing register when bidding. We carry out assessments for those that are approaching via the homeless route, so vulnerability assessments on medical grounds. We also carry out recommendations for future housing needs. This is to determine basically the type of property that is suitable for a client, i.e. you might have a wheelchair user that is on the 2nd floor and might require wheelchair adapted property on the ground floor. So we carry out these assessments and return those recommendations. So we come across vulnerabilities via documentations that applicants provide, or clients, or health professionals. So these could be GP/hospital letters, letters from specialists, reports from occupational therapists. So we receive basically official diagnosis. So it might be, I don't know, a client that is blind, a client that is deaf, a person that has mental health issues, they might be schizophrenic, or a client that is severely mobility impaired. So how I found the tool, it's literally very user-friendly, it's quick and easy to use. It takes no more than 2 minutes to basically input the information. It's just a quick tick box and a small sort of data entry as to, for example, the medical condition that a client has. And I think it's just great across basically the council, because what happens is you get an overall understanding of the client that you're speaking to. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, I just put it on.
Excellent. Right, so yes, how to improve. So I don't know whether it will be widely available in terms of council-wide, but I think it will be useful for teams and especially frontline services to have access to this snapshot. Also, I think there needs to be a bit of clarity as to whether we can add vulnerabilities for another member of the household or the whole family. For example, we come across cases whereby an applicant might have a child that's autistic, so it would be good to capture that kind of information. And also, as we know, we currently use quite a few systems, so it would be great if we can pull the data automatically from, for example, UHW or UHT. Generally, the vulnerability snapshot is very useful, again, because it gives the user a picture, an instant picture of the client that they're speaking to, and identifies their strengths and their vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. It's really brilliant to hear how it is from your point of view as an officer using this. So thanks so much for agreeing to talk. It's great to hear about it. Just a couple of other things. So as I mentioned, we have 12 different officers using this. So just some summaries of the things that we've got some feedback from people so far. So as David mentioned, people are really appreciating the simplicity and ease of use, but need a bit of support about how to actually build this into day-to-day processes and really just your routine. Staff do see the potential to improve the way they work with residents, having a bit of a head start in dealing with a client, potentially even speeding up communication and calls. But that's all speculative at the moment, and we really need to measure some impact around that. There's also a bit of a question about staff who have less resident contact, don't always feel it's appropriate to open up conversations around this. So there might be some additional work that we can do to help people see how this is relevant in their role and help people feel confident to have those conversations with residents as well. So what's next? The resources at the side, we want those to kind of pop up in an order of priority. So we want the Hackney Commission services to come first, for example. Another thing is staff have been sharing a bit of nervousness about what this means in GDPR and actually what this means, how you can have a conversation about this over the phone. We're confident that this isn't an issue, so we know that as councils, you have the power to process data in pursuit of statutory duty, which includes preventing and relieving homelessness. But we're talking to Nicholas, the data protection officer, to get some advice about how staff can talk to residents about how you're using their information and how they can exercise their rights as well. So watch this space. And finally, as I said, collecting evidence of impact. So we want to know when people are using this, do they do something differently? Do they work with residents in a different way because they're capturing vulnerabilities and assets? And then people who see the results of that as part of someone's record on single view, does that result in working with residents in a different or more appropriate way? And that's what we will be looking at in the next 4 weeks. And really that's so that we can be ready for a service assessment. So this is a standard set by central government that makes sure that we're building the right thing in the right way. And ultimately, it's a bit of an assessment that will test if a tool like the vulnerability snapshot meets government guidelines and if it's worth us continuing to develop this in coming weeks and months.
Hello again. So now on to some updates around the shared plan, which is a tool to enable officers and residents to collaborate on a shared plan of action. And as a recap, this is where the shared plan fits in with the service vision, so it can be used along multiple journeys depending on the level of need that someone has. So on the orange line, the shared plan could be used as a self-serve tool. On the light blue line, the shared plan could be used as a replacement PHP. And on the dark blue line, multidisciplinary plans could be created for more complex cases to support collaboration between professionals both inside and outside the service. So this sprint, the main focus for us has been on user research. So last sprint, we focused on user research with residents, and this sprint, we've been focusing on user research with staff. So thanks to everybody who's volunteered and everyone who we've managed to speak to so far. And we've now completed 7 one-hour interviews and usability testing sessions with officers. And then also this sprint, we've continued to make small tweaks to improve the usability of the shared plan based on the feedback that we've heard. So what did we want to find out? We've had 2 main aims of the research, really. The first was we wanted to understand how officers are currently conducting and creating PHPs, and so we could understand how the shared plan might work within their current processes. And then secondly, we wanted to conduct usability testing to identify how we could improve the experience. So for example, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what would you expect to happen next, and for us to find out what's missing. And so findings, the findings were very insightful. One of the first things that came up was that as a large amount of the assessment is spent gathering documentation, making phone calls to confirm status and eligibility, and then explaining the process to people for the very first time, officers just don't have the time to actually create the PHPs during the assessment. And working remotely and conducting interviews over the phone has made it harder, and the processes have had to adjust. So everybody said that they've had to shorten the appointments to try and keep people engaged. One person here says that people don't like being on the phone for more than half an hour, and after that they start to get irritated and aggressive. Another said it would take 3 hours if they were to complete a PHP during the assessment. And another told us that they arrange a follow-up call to read through the PHP afterwards. Also, we heard that residents come to the assessments completely blind with unrealistic expectations of their options. And during the assessment, officers are having to shatter people's expectations very quickly and manage that hostility that often arises as people react to what they're hearing. And that can be a very draining process, and it really prevents the time from being used more productively. So we heard lots of people say things like they were tired of repeating the same information, trying to get the same messages through. And one commented about how difficult it is for somebody to quickly come to terms with the fact that most of London is now suddenly unaffordable to them and what that means for them going forward. And then lastly, when it came to the shared plan itself, whilst it was generally well received, it wasn't necessarily seen by everybody as a PHP replacement just yet. So even though officers all acknowledge that the residents don't actually read their PHPs, there seems to be comfort in officers being able to provide the comprehensive documentation that gets put into a PHP to make them feel like they've covered all their bases and they've given as much information as they could to a resident should they come back and complain or have further questions. So one person said that even though the shared plan was much simpler, they were worried it was perhaps too simplified. And below, they referred to it as a tool for action, not necessarily a personal housing plan, which for me is an interesting one to consider if there should be a difference between those two. And then also there was a reference to the PHP being a few pages to keep with you throughout your journey, almost like a reference booklet. So what does this mean for us? So we've been testing the shared plan as a PHP to see if it can replace the Jigsaw PHP. And our conclusion at the moment is that the shared plan would probably fail. And this isn't because of the tool itself. And while there are many improvements to be made, that's quite straightforward for us to address. But the real sticking point here is the current process in the environment in which the assessment currently takes place. More specifically, there's a real lack of time to introduce and work through a plan of action during that assessment. So where do we go from here? So rather than abandoning the idea of using the shared plan as a PHP, what we want to do next is to try a different experiment first before repeating that PHP test. And so as a new experiment, we want to introduce the shared plan earlier on in the resident's journey at the point at which they first approach and book an assessment. So this could be a standard pre-assessment plan that everybody gets. So in the first image on the screen, the resident might open a plan and then see a page which explains that, this is your housing, this is your shared plan, this is going to be shared with your housing officer. And as you progress throughout your journey, you're going to have actions assigned to you over time. And then on the second page, there might be a couple of small actions that we ask people to take before the assessment, like reading through some content which explains what will happen at the assessment, how to prepare for it, and what your choices are likely to be. And so we want to find out if this will help reinforce the message that they'll be required to complete actions during their journey, and it's not just all on the council. Will it help manage people's expectations and help them to come better prepared for their assessment? And then lastly, can we free up time during that assessment to help focus on actions to address the situation and have a more productive conversation? And then, so that was shared plan as a PHP, but obviously the shared plan, as I said, can work on multiple parts of the service. So on the orange line, we'll hear a bit more about self-serve tools in a minute. On the light blue line, as I just explained, we'll start to test the pre-assessment plan. And then on the dark blue line in the next sprint, we've got 2 sessions planned with housing and adult social care to create plans for 2 residents with complex needs. And then we'll also be speaking to Sabrina about bringing the plan into those who are currently in hotel COVID accommodation from August.
Cool, thanks Chris. That's a nice segue into self-service tools. So these are interactive tools that will help residents help themselves. So this, as many of you will know, is looking at the orange line, thinking about tools for people, those kind of follow-ups and nudges, as well as information and advice. So if you're at the last show and share, you'll remember we shared a kind of fictional story to try and look at all the different opportunities for tools along the self-service journey. So a lot of this is relevant to what Chris was talking about. How do you help someone understand their housing options and what to expect right at the beginning? How can you identify what strengths and assets people might have that would help them help themselves? What are various step-by-step guides that would help people calculate affordability and track a property search? Different ways they can request support from Hackney to stay on track and stay motivated? And are there ways that we can automatically check in with people, particularly by SMS, to help them sustain their tenancy? And over the next 4 weeks, these are the 2 areas that we'd like to focus on. So looking in particular at that stage around understanding housing options and taking steps towards finding a property, which I'll cover in a bit more detail now. So this is building on what Chris was talking about. We'd like to understand, is giving residents an action plan before their assessment help people understand what their role is and how much they will need to participate in preventing or relieving their homelessness. So this is where we could share actions with residents before an appointment. So that might link out to, watching a video, like Introduction to Housing Options, for example, or doing a quiz, which might help people understand a bit more about the housing situation in Hackney. And we really would want to see, do residents actually complete these actions? And does that give you, as an officer, a bit of an understanding of how engaged someone is and if they might be suitable for that self-service journey? But equally, does it help residents understand what to expect and the participation required, as mentioned? And then the next thing we want to do some tests around is there a need for an interactive version of that purple Finding a Property guide, which I'm sure you will have seen? Would residents actually use this? And how detailed do we go on calculating affordability? So we've got a ready-made prototype with the paper version or the PDF, where we can test the content. Do residents understand it? Do they know what they have to do? But, at tenancy training and other things, when we were giving those out pre-COVID, were residents filling that in? Were they using that as an interactive guide? And then we can also start to test the usability of what this might look like as an interactive guide. So here, this is those same 6 steps, the same content, but you can actually see that this will link out to other tools. So if I need to calculate my bedroom need, I might go out to the LHA bedroom calculator and be able to put information in there. There's also options here to start tracking your property searches. So we want to see if people would engage with something like this. So if I was looking at a property, I might be able to add information about where the property is, the rent is, notes. And so we'll be able to test these 2 things alongside each other. The content from the previous plan, but this is just a concept at the moment, just a click-through design that we can see if this would be usable and useful to residents as part of that self-service journey. So really, this is the question we're trying to answer around self-service tools in the next 4 weeks. We want to know what we can introduce to the service that will have the most impact. So that's, should we do it? And also, are we able to do it? What would have the most impact? And these could be things that we build from scratch, or it might be finding existing tools and just bringing them into the service and introducing them. So if you can hang around for another 10 or 15 minutes, we have an activity, which is around the tools and teams guide that Claire introduced at the beginning. Otherwise, if not, thanks so much for coming along today. Look out for some requests about things to get involved in coming in from your inbox, and please let Claire or any of us know if you want to get involved in any of the things that you've seen today.